Yeah.
Ringo Starkey doesn't really work. Ringo Starr, fabulous.
When fans think of Ringo Starr, they picture the affable Beatle with the steady beat and easygoing demeanor. The good-natured drummer who delivered the reliable backbeat on Come Together. The peace and love ambassador who seemed to get along with everyone.
Which interests me, because when I was thinking about it, that is just fantastic drumming, and for the time, very different from any.
But behind that cheerful persona and those trademark thumbs-up gestures was a seasoned musician with surprisingly strong opinions about his drumming contemporaries and musical competitors. While Starr has maintained a diplomatic public image for decades, those in his inner circle have witnessed moments when his friendly facade slipped.
Well, it was going to be different from that moment on, but we didn't know it was going to be quite as big. We did not know that.
Revealing sharp criticisms of bands that failed to impress his discerning ear. Ringo knows exactly what makes a good rhythm section, revealed longtime Beatles producer George Martin in a rare 2008 interview. He just doesn't usually share those opinions outside the studio. Today, we're counting down the 6 bands that reportedly raised Ringo's rarely seen ire, and why even some of rock's biggest names found themselves on the wrong end of the funny Beatles' not-so-funny criticism. 6. The Monkees. Our countdown begins with the manufactured band that many dismissed as the Prefab Four. While the Monkees eventually gained respect for their musical contributions,
when I needed sunshine, I got rain.
Ringo Starr reportedly harbored a particular disdain for what he viewed as a calculated attempt to capitalize on the Beatles' success. According to Beatles roadie Mal Evans, Starr's irritation began when the Monkees television show premiered in 1966. Ringo allegedly watched one episode and told us, "They've taken our mop tops, our humor, and even our bloody musical style. But at least they had the decency to get a proper drummer," Evans claimed in his posthumously published diaries. This backhanded compliment to Mickey Dolenz reflected Starr's nuanced view of the situation, respecting the musicians while resenting the concept. The tension deepened when the Monkees began playing their own instruments and writing material. Beatles' personal assistant Neil Aspinall recalled Starr's alleged reaction after hearing their 1967 album Headquarters. Ringo supposedly said, "Now they're trying to convince everyone they're a real band. It's like watching a puppet show where the puppets start claiming they don't have strings." What reportedly irked Starr most was the American media's constant comparisons between the two groups. During the Beatles' 1967 American tour, when repeatedly asked about the Monkees by reporters, Starr allegedly told George Harrison backstage, "Next journalist who asks me about those television musicians is getting my drumstick in their eye." 5. Led Zeppelin. Few would expect tension between rock royalty like Ringo Starr and Led Zeppelin, but according to those close to the Beatles' drummer, he maintained a long-standing musical grudge against the hard rock pioneers, particularly their thunderous drummer, John Bonham. The seeds of Starr's reported animosity were planted in 1968, when Jimmy Page and John Bonham were session musicians on a solo project Starr was producing. Sound engineer Eddie Kramer witnessed a telling moment in the studio. Ringo allegedly watched Bonham's bombastic playing style and muttered to his assistant, "This bloke doesn't know the difference between playing drums and attacking them. It's not a bloody war zone." When Led Zeppelin exploded onto the scene in 1969, Starr reportedly viewed their success with a mixture of professional respect and personal distaste. Beatles associate Tony Bramwell claimed that after attending an early Zeppelin concert, Starr told him, "They're taking everything about rock and making it louder and less musical. It's like watching someone turn a watercolor into a sledgehammer." The philosophical divide centered on drumming styles. While Starr prided himself on serving the song with tasteful restraint, Bonham's powerful, spotlight-grabbing performances represented everything he avoided. Producer Glyn Johns, who worked with both drummers, recalled Starr's alleged assessment. Ringo supposedly said, "Anyone can be loud. The real skill is knowing when not to play. Bonham hasn't learned that playing fewer notes might actually make a better song." What reportedly frustrated Starr most was the shifting critical perception of drumming excellence. After years of being underappreciated for his musical sensitivity, he watched as Bonham's thunderous approach became the new standard. Beatles biographer Mark Lewisohn quoted Starr's supposed lament during this period. "For years, critics said I wasn't flashy enough, and now this new lot comes along hitting everything in sight, and suddenly that's genius? Perhaps I should have just hit Paul with my sticks instead of keeping the bloody beat." 4. The Beach Boys. The rivalry between the Beatles and the Beach Boys is well documented, but less known is Ringo Starr's specific grievances with the American band. Grievances that went beyond the famous Pet Sounds Sgt. Pepper competition to something more personally grating for the drummer. According to Beatles insider Peter Brown, Starr's frustration began when the Beach Boys' early surf rock hits gained traction in Britain. Ringo allegedly told Brian Epstein, "Their drummer just plays the same bloody pattern on every song. If I did that, you'd sack me," Brown revealed in his memoir. This criticism of Dennis Wilson's straightforward approach reflected Starr's pride in his adaptability across musical styles. The tension escalated during the Beatles' first American tour in 1964, when both bands shared billing at several shows. Tour manager Bob Bonas claimed after one performance, Starr allegedly confronted Beach Boys road manager Fred Vale, saying, "Your boys have two good singers and fancy harmonies, but they've got a rhythm section that couldn't swing if you hung them from the rafters." What reportedly irritated Starr most was the Beach Boys' studio practices. When word reached the Beatles camp that Brian Wilson was using session drummers instead of Dennis Wilson, Starr supposedly told recording engineer Norman Smith, "At least when people criticize my drumming, they're actually criticizing me, not some hired hand brought in because the real drummer isn't up to snuff." 3. The Rolling Stones. The Beatles-Stones rivalry is legendary, but while John Lennon and Mick Jagger traded public barbs, Ringo Starr reportedly harbored his own specific grudge against the band.
Just something they cooked up. There was no big battle between us and the Stones. No, and Charlie's a good friend.
Particularly directed at his drumming counterpart, Charlie Watts. According to Beatles roadie Kevin Harrington, the tension began during early shared concerts in 1963. Ringo allegedly watched Charlie's minimalist playing style and told George, "He's even more basic than I am, but they call him cool while they call me boring," Harrington claimed in a 2010 documentary. This perceived double standard in how critics evaluated them reportedly bothered Starr for years. The professional rivalry intensified when the Stones began recording at Abbey Road. Engineer Jeff Emmerich recalled Starr's alleged reaction after hearing the Stones had booked the studio right after a Beatles session. Ringo supposedly examined Charlie's drum setup and muttered, "Look at this kit, barely touched. He's not playing the drums so much as occasionally reminding everyone they're still there." What reportedly frustrated Starr most was the contrasting public images of the two bands. While the Beatles were initially portrayed as the clean-cut alternative to the Stones' bad boy image, Starr, who had the roughest background of any Beatle, found this characterization particularly grating. Beatles press officer Derek Taylor quoted Starr's supposed complaint. "The papers call them dangerous and call us nice boys. But I came up through the Hamburg clubs same as the others. Charlie looks like an accountant and gets called a rock rebel. I actually am one and get called cuddly." 2. The WHO. Perhaps no musical rivalry better illustrates Ringo Starr's drumming philosophy than his reported disdain for The Who, specifically his fundamental disagreement with Keith Moon's flamboyant, spotlight-stealing approach behind the kit. According to Beatles associate Tony Barrow, Starr's irritation began after seeing The Who perform at London's Marquee Club in 1965. Ringo allegedly turned to Neil Aspinall and said, "That drummer doesn't play with the band. He competes against them. It's not music, it's a bloody circus act," Barrow claimed in his memoir. This criticism reflected Starr's core belief that a drummer's primary role was supporting the song rather than dominating it. The philosophical conflict deepened during the recording of Sgt. Pepper, when The Who released their own ambitious singles.
And the slogans are replaced by the
Recording engineer Ken Scott recalled Starr's alleged reaction after hearing "I Can See for Miles." Ringo supposedly said, "Listen to Moon flailing away like he's fighting off wasps. The song would be twice as good if he played half as much." What reportedly frustrated Starr most was watching Moon receive acclaim for techniques he considered musically inappropriate. Beatles biographer Hunter Davies quoted Starr's supposed assessment during this period. "Keith plays like there's a different time signature in each limb. People call it genius. If I did that, they'd call it a mistake." The professional tension had personal dimensions as well. Both drummers moved in the same London social circles, creating awkward encounters. Musician Klaus Voormann, friend to both, claimed after one industry party, Starr allegedly confided, "Moon's the same on stage as off, desperate to be the center of attention. I've spent my career trying to make songs better, while he spent his trying to make sure everyone notices him playing them." Number 1. Cream. At the top of our countdown sits the supergroup that reportedly drew Ringo Starr's most intense musical criticism.
These Beatles go round with gold.
Cream, whose virtuosic approach to rock represented everything the Beatles' drummer philosophically opposed, particularly Ginger Baker's technical, solo-heavy drumming style. According to Beatles insider Neil Aspinall, Starr's frustration began after attending an early Cream performance in 1966. Ringo allegedly walked out halfway through and told Brian Epstein, "That's not a band."
Because I like to hang out. You hang out with the writer, you hang out with the, musician.
It's three soloists fighting for space. The drummer thinks he's the bloody conductor, Aspinall revealed in a retrospective interview. This criticism reflected Starr's fundamental belief that musical ego should always serve the song. The tension deepened as Cream gained critical acclaim specifically for the instrumental prowess Starr rejected. Beatles sound engineer Jeff Emmerich recalled Starr's alleged reaction after hearing "Sunshine of Your Love." Ringo supposedly said, "Listen to Baker showing off while the song struggles to break through. It's like watching someone doing mathematical equations when they should be telling a story." What reportedly irritated Starr most was the changing critical perception of drumming excellence. After years of being dismissed as technically limited, he watched as Baker's complex approach was celebrated precisely for the flashy elements Starr had consciously avoided. Beatles associate Tony Bramwell quoted Starr's supposed lament, "For years they've called me the luckiest drummer in the world because I play simply. Now Baker plays like he's got 4 arms and suddenly that's what drumming should be? Perhaps I should have just turned my kit over on every track." And there you have it, the 6 bands that reportedly found themselves on the receiving end of Ringo Starr's rarely expressed musical criticism. From the Monkees' manufactured beginnings to Led Zeppelin's thunderous power, the Beach Boys' rhythmic simplicity to the Rolling Stones' cultivated image, the Who's theatrical excess to Cream's virtuosic indulgence, each relationship reveals something about Starr's deeply held musical philosophy.